All right, well, we were hoping to be joined by Status Coup reporter Tina Desiree Berg to talk about her new reporting down in Cop City, but she had technical difficulties, couldn't join us, but we wanted to let you guys know about it anyway. If we could put up her latest dispatch for Status Coup News called Inside the Dangerous Domestic Terrorism Charges Against Cop City Protesters. I think this is something that should be concerning to viewers across the political spectrum, whether you wholeheartedly support the protesters in Cop City, which is a confrontation in Atlanta between police and protesters who are trying to stop basically the demolition of a wooded area in order to construct a police training center, or if you're completely hostile to them and want them all arrested and charged with protesting, civil disobedience, whatever it is, because what they're doing is they're ratcheting up these charges to the level of quote unquote domestic terrorism, and Tina Desiree got a number of the kind of arrest warrants and police documents related to this from the protesters. We can roll some of her footage from Saturday. She was there as people were getting arrested. But what's your take on the domestic terrorism book being thrown at these protesters?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And one of the questions I wanted to ask Tina is, as you're reading the charges, my read on it is that they're trying to, in order to charge people with domestic terrorism, what they're doing is lumping all of these protesters in with people who, for instance, have been engaged in violence towards police and saying, because you're part of this group that has been engaging in violence towards police, we're charging you with domestic terrorism. You can see on this video, I mean, just stunning scenes out of Atlanta. That seems to be the argument. It's an interesting argument, especially as you said, you've seen a lot of pushback from the right on January 6 charges. And that has been a real concern that's mounted, that weaponizing these broad charges and these broad labels of domestic terrorism is something that can certainly be abused. And in the cases, as Tina points out, the charges for these individuals are not that they themselves, in every case, were engaged directly in serious violence, so much as they were there and breaking the law in some way or the other. So we're throwing the book at you and saying, because you're part of this group, you're a domestic terrorist. Now, I think one interesting thing worth noting is that of the arrests, only one of those people was from Georgia. To my knowledge, only one of those people was a local. So that's one thing I have seen folks on the right focus on, is the fact that these are all a lot of people from out of town. What do you think of that read on this? They're conflating, or they're lumping everybody in, saying if you're there and you're part of this group, and this group, the protester, the activist who was tragically shot and killed, had a gun. His mother has, or their mother, I believe the protester is not binary, has said, we don't know why the gun may have been there to protect from animals in the forest, because that's what's going on here. And that certainly seems plausible to me, but that's what the cops are going to use then to say, this is a domestic terrorist group, they're armed and targeting police. Right,
these arrests are coming after the killing of Emmanuel Turan, a protester known as Tortuguita, and there's a theory that's kicked around that says that they did not have a weapon on them. So a police officer was shot and injured. Police returned fire, killed Tortuguita. Later, after a very long search, found a weapon. What people are saying down there is that they suspect somebody else pulled that trigger, that it was not him. Well, I mean, shooting is foul play.
No, on the behalf of the cops that are trying to pin the gun to Tortuguita.
They killed him. They find a gun. They'd like to say, okay, well, he was the one that was pulling the trigger. There will be forensics done. So we should know soon, whether or not there's residue. That's something that can be, demonstrated or not. But your point is right on, that lumping everybody together is deeply un-American. And there's also an irony to it that neoliberalism says that everybody is an individual ripped from community, except when we want to lump you in with domestic terrorism charges. Then, if you're anywhere near somebody else who's doing something that we find criminal, then you also then become a criminal. So all of a sudden, we believe in community. But just to pull out one completely absurd example from Tina Desiree's reporting, one suspect is charged, and this is from the charging document. The crime they committed was fleeing from Atlanta Police Department investigator Ronald Sluss, causing injuries to Sluss's right knee and right elbow, said injuries being scrapes and cuts. So a person ran, and you saw the scenes. Like, those are the types of scenes that are going on. So somebody's running away from this. A cop chases them, falls, and gets cuts and, quote, literally, this is from their own documents, but it gets, quote, scrapes and cuts on their right knee and right elbow, and then charge the person running with domestic terrorism. We use the word dystopian on this show a lot, but we're not overusing it yet, because what could be more dystopian than that?
The history of the leveling of domestic terrorism charges, I mean, what they're charging in the document, again, this is, as I'm reading the charges and trying to parse what law enforcement is saying, they really are making that connection between, what the group is engaged in and then what they can charge the individuals with. And as you point out from Tina's report, in individual cases, there's some really low-level stuff that doesn't seem to qualify as domestic terrorism, in as much as, except for if you're saying because they're a part of this group that was engaged in domestic terrorism, et cetera, then they are guilty by association because they were involved in a riot that was domestic terrorism. That would be the law enforcement argument. But
here's another one for you.
Yeah.
It's, possessing road flares of the same style and type as have been used to set fires on the property, and possessing incendiary devices. So possessing road flares is now a crime. And not just a crime, but domestic terrorism.
And that's what I was going to ask you is, do you see this as being in line with a history of abusing the domestic terrorism charge, maybe post 9/11, in a way that's chilling and attempts to chill and silence activities? Because a lot of the stuff that they're charging them with is against the law. Evading law enforcement is against the law. To slap a domestic terrorism charge on top of it, I wanted to ask you what you think about that decision politically, how that kind of fits into the history.
It does. It goes back to the 1990s. Well, actually, I mean, it goes back much further than that. You can always take it back further. But in the 1990s, it really ramped up with, the ALF and ELF. You remember the Animal Liberation Front, Environmental Liberation Front, where they started, trying to then, slap terrorism charges on people who were engaged in civil disobedience that was extending into, significant property destruction, like burning down, a ski lodge or something like that. And then after 2001, with public support for prosecuting terrorism cases at 90+%, that's when the United States government really ramped it up and said, oh, now we can really drive this home. And they've never really let their foot off the gas. I
think there are really serious concerns of the double standard that's applied to, or over the course of the last few years, the Trump years, and that's what I'm talking about specifically. I'm not talking about in general. I'm just saying this is a trend in the last few years, a double standard that the media applies to political violence on the left and on the right, which obviously is both wrong. And so I do have concerns about double standards from law enforcement and from media about that violence. That doesn't mean, though, that there aren't distinctions that are well worth maintaining. And when we have charges on the books that exist, to add the domestic terrorism charge to people who possess flares, as opposed to using the flares for violence, which they don't seem to have this person on, I still think that's probably an important distinction.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.